to introduce our keynote speaker, Alicia Glen. Please welcome back to the stage CHPC Chair Richard Roberts.
Thank you so much. I thought the most interesting part of that was now I know why these guys are all involved in, this kind of work. Their idea of vacation is going to Uganda. It's my great privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. We want to hear from the speaker. We know we're running a little bit behind in the program, so I'm going to just say that it's been one of the great privileges of my life to know, and to have worked closely with Alicia since 1997. And by now, most of you, if not all of you, know the elements of her story and her impressive accomplishments, in large part because you, too, have also worked very closely with her. Native New Yorker, daughter of New York City public servants, graduate of Amherst College and Columbia Law School, wife and mother of two wonderful girls, former legal aid and real estate lawyer, HPD Assistant Commissioner for Development, and head of the Goldman Sachs Urban Investment Group. While at HPD, she worked closely with the private sector while fiercely protecting the interests of the agency and the people it served. And at Goldman, she set the standard by creating the most innovative, socially responsible corporate investing program in the country. And in the wake of the financial crisis, successfully transitioned that program to one that worked within a changed regulatory framework without sacrificing its trademark creativity. She is fearless, hard-charging, straight-talking, irreverent, and irrepressible. She has a lightning-quick wit and a curious and a complex mind. She has an eye for talent and hires great staff. She also has an encyclopedic knowledge of New York City restaurants and their wine lists, a talent that she knows will fade without constant application. We knew that Mayor de Blasio was serious about impacting the affordable housing issues affecting this city when he hired Alicia, because in her, he found someone who we all know will deliver on his agenda, and she has already made her mark. But I want you to think about one thing. It has been nearly 25 years since the deputy mayor responsible for housing has spent significant time as a houser before assuming these enormous responsibilities. While we know that she and her team, including HPD Commissioner Vicki Bean and others, have been feverishly working on an important new housing plan, its release is imminent, and she knew the timing when she accepted this engagement, and we are extremely flattered and grateful that she made time for us. Ladies and gentlemen, Deputy Mayor for Housing and Economic Development, Alicia K. Glen.
Oh my God, I feel like I'm at the mayor's podium because there's a thing here to stand up on, but that's for Geraldine, shocker. But I will just move that just a little bit. Reams of paper, very elegant. Thank you, Richard, for that lovely introduction. And thank you really for everybody here to be here and still be here, shockingly. I know everybody's extremely busy and these events can feel like they go on forever, but they're really important, and I'm very, very excited that I was able to make it today because we are in fact working on just a little something down at City Hall. I also really want to thank all the other honorees for their work in the industry. Meredith, that $300 million Goldman invested, I hope you're going to return it with a return, or else I'll have a clawback that I don't particularly want to deal with in my life. But I really do want to congratulate all the other honorees today. It's not an exaggeration for me to say that I have literally worked with or for every single one of them. I mean, that's quite extraordinary when I look at the arc of my own career. I also want to thank the amazing colleagues I have with me here today. I have the wonderful Vicki Bean, Gary Rodney, Shola, Carl, all the other wonderful people from the administration who are here, also taking time out of a very busy day, and my amazing Chief of Staff, James, who's just keeping me caffeinated and on the road. And I really want to give a special shout out to Marvin Marcus, who is truly marvelous. I have been lucky enough to be the beneficiary of his vast knowledge of all things housing and all things New York City. He really is a New York treasure, and I know that I will continue to benefit from the special way in which he sees New York, and he will no doubt continue to advise me in my new role. So let me start, and I'll try to be brief because I do want to make sure people get back to work, about why we're all here today, and why we get up in the morning and we open the paper or we switch on our iPad And we read things like we did this morning about the challenges that are facing our elderly and our low-income New Yorkers. And that's why we do go to work and we make a difference every single day. New York was built around the idea that hard work and ambition are the great equalizers. It didn't matter where you came from or how much you arrived with, but what mattered was how hard you were willing to work. And the going might be tough at first, but if we put in enough of our sweat equity and we really do everything that's expected of us, you would eventually be rewarded with a share of that American dream. And that was the deal for generations of New Yorkers. I'm sure everybody in this room, whether it was you or your grandmother or your great-grandmother or your great-grandfather, came to this city and had that dream. And that dream is not really what's available to those who are coming today. According to a recent report by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, in today's New York City, you would need to earn about $28 an hour to afford a market-rate two-bedroom unit. And that is equivalent to roughly 3.5 times the minimum hourly wage. In other words, hard work alone isn't enough to get you a decent place to live in our city anymore. And it's not an isolated problem. In 2012, almost 55% of all rental households were rent burdened. And for those of you who aren't housing nerds, that means that you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing costs. More scary than that is that the share of households who are rent burdened has increased by more than 11 percentage points since 2000. 11 percentage points doesn't sound like a big number, but that's hundreds of thousands of families are now rent burdened. Now, in part, this is the result of rising rents, but it's also the result of a housing shortage. Nearly 1 million households in our city earn less than 50% of the area median income, or just under $42,000 for a family of four. Just think about that for a minute. A family of four, $42,000 a year, and that's 50% of AMI. And yet there are only 425,000 housing units available for rents suitable for that income level. So it's not just unfair, it's completely unsustainable. If those trends persist, our economy, not to mention our culture, which in large part stems from our diversity, will suffer. We simply cannot afford to sit idly by while middle and low-income New Yorkers are squeezed out of the city that has prided itself on a thriving middle class and one where people who are deterred now from coming because it is getting so increasingly unaffordable. So look, I'm all for revitalizing all other cities. I spent my life at UIG and in other parts of my life worrying about other cities, and I wish them well. But I really care about what we're doing here in New York City, and we cannot have that dream deferred any longer. Mayor de Blasio obviously realizes this and has made it a central part of his platform. As you know, we will be presenting to New Yorkers a 5-borough, 10-year housing plan. And it will outline how we will achieve our ambitious goal of creating and preserving 200,000 units of affordable housing over the next 10 years. And while the plan may be focused on the future, it is truly informed by the past. One of the most informative and inspiring parts of working on this plan has been to put it into the context of New York City's rich history of housing innovation. Just to go back in time a little bit. The city's first great housing hero was Jacob Riis, who was born in Denmark in 1849. Moved to New York City at the age of 21 with next to nothing. After he arrived, he worked as a carpenter, a salesman, and eventually as a newspaper man. And in between jobs, he often wound up living on the streets. Eventually, he found work as a steady reporter for the New York Tribune, and his office was located on Mulberry Street, now in trendy Nolita, but then it was known Death Thoroughfare. And at the time, the Lower East Side was the most populous neighborhood in the world. Some 340,000 people lived within a single square mile. That'll give you a sense of what the density of that era was like. And it made it the most densely populated part of the world. But because the words that he was trying to describe were not really sufficient to look at and talk about the squalor he saw around him, he became our first true urban photographer, releasing his famous book, How the Other Half Lives. And that documented the terrible, terrible living conditions on the Lower East Side. It shaped New York City as much as any other book before or since, because it also helped to inspire the New York State Tenement Housing Act of 1901, a landmark piece of legislation that applied to all new buildings. And those new requirements were so essential that it can be hard for any of us in the modern world to imagine living without them. And yet at the time, it seemed like a radical thought. But even then, that act could only do so much. So by 1934, when Fiorello LaGuardia became mayor, there were still 350,000 substandard tenement buildings that hadn't been upgraded. 1,300 tenements had no outhouses, 30,000 had no bathing facilities, and Mayor LaGuardia was absolutely committed to doing something about it, even in the face of the Great Depression. So less than a month after taking office, LaGuardia established the New York City Housing Authority, the nation's first public housing authority. The first month. Think about the 100 days we all think about now. He did that in the first month. And then by 1941, New York had already erected 13 public housing projects with 17,000 apartments, more than any other city in the country. An amazing feat when you think about the challenges of the time. The next leap forward in our housing policy was also the product of an iconic mayor whose ambitions were just as big as his personality. You may be familiar with the 1986 Ed Koch 10-year housing plan. And so while the Bronx was no longer officially burning, it was certainly smoldering, and so were many other low-income neighborhoods. But again, like all great mayors and great plans, it began with an idea and on the back of a napkin. Apparently, the myth goes, and I'm sure there are people in this room who can confirm this, that Koch and Abe Biederman and even the young little Tony Shoris, my colleague, were sitting in a restaurant near City Hall and literally sketched it out over lunch. That sketch ultimately turned into a $5 billion plan that created and rehabilitated more than 150,000 affordable apartments, focusing on returning the in-rem buildings to the private and nonprofit sectors and housing the neediest New Yorkers, but also simultaneously catalyzing the revitalization of whole neighborhoods that had been written off. That legacy of using housing as a fundamental tool in community development and bringing together the public and private sectors was continued in both the Dinkins and Giuliani administrations, and to work not just on finishing up the Koch plan, but really as a testament to how fundamentally solid the notion of those private and public partnerships were. That legacy, of course, continued under Mayor Bloomberg, and he also supported very innovative housing efforts and using a whole new set of financing tools in our expanding housing toolbox to develop on private sites once we began to run out of public sites. But he also understood we needed to identify new neighborhoods to do housing development. So New York City has always been on the forefront of innovative and progressive housing policies, and we've always put our money where our mouth is. So that brings me back to the present and the 10-year housing plan that Mayor de Blasio will present. If Jacob Riis, LaGuardia, and Koch taught us anything, it is this, that crisis can lead to opportunity, and we know this very well. So even amid the discouraging numbers that we keep reading about every morning and the blogs popping up with the latest figures on poverty and rising rents, there is reason for hope. For the first time in decades, more people are moving to or staying in the city than they are leaving. That includes seniors and families and young people who come here, quote, in quest of something. Our plan will be big enough for all of them. It is built around a number of key guiding principles. One, our housing policies must address the city's changing demographics and expand the range of those who we serve. A sustainable and fair housing market has to meet the needs of all New Yorkers, and that includes both the lowest income residents and our middle income workers who are increasingly priced out of the city. Two, the city's planning processes and land use policies must be revamped. To become a more affordable city, we must become a denser city. And that means investing in infrastructure and services that will make our neighborhoods more livable. And this administration will not just define livable on our own. We will go out to the communities early and often to make sure that our plan reflects their need and contains their input. 3, economic diversity must be a cornerstone of housing development. When we rezone a neighborhood and unlock substantial new housing capacity, we're not just going to encourage developers to build affordable housing, we will require it. 4, our municipal tools and our public assets need to be deployed much more effectively. We know we have to get rid of inefficient regulations, reduce delays, redundancies. We need to align our tax incentive and zoning policies to drive more housing production and have a greater impact. We have to seize the opportunities we have to develop housing at public sites, not just owned by the city, but by all of our partners in the public sector. 5, we must strategically protect the past investments, and we have to lock in affordability in changing neighborhoods. Look, the city has already invested billions of dollars in subsidized affordable housing. Many of you in this room have been part of those transactions. We cannot lose them to market pressures or to expiring regulatory agreements. We have to have a clearer pathway to preservation, and we are committed to establishing that. And look, preservation is not just about the numbers. Oh, it's easier to get the numbers in preservation. It's about the people who live in those buildings, in those neighborhoods. That has got to be at the forefront of our work. All of this work has to be part of a truly, truly collaborative effort. I think it's pretty true to say that the work of the plan is exhaustive and comprehensive. We have coordinated with over 13 city agencies for 8-10 weeks of working day and night. We've met with more than 200 individual stakeholders, including advocates, developers, officials, labor leaders, and our conversations are far from over. We will continue to engage our current partners, and we'll seek out new partners as we begin to implement this very, very ambitious plan. Without all of these stakeholders, including the real estate, construction, design, and banking sectors, we simply cannot do this. Sadly, there's one partner and many others who really haven't been on the ground as much as we'd like to see that much, and that is the federal government. In Mayor LaGuardia's day, New York and Washington worked hand in glove to create affordable housing. And that's been a real problem for those of us who have been in the trenches for years, seeing the federal government slowly but surely retrench from many of our affordable housing programs. But despite recent budgetary constraints, mayors across the city are rising to the challenge and forging innovative solutions to these intractable problems. And I'm proud to say that New York City has paved the way for many of those innovative solutions, and we will continue to be leaders in developing new approaches in public-private partnerships to meet our ambitious goals. We haven't given up on Washington, and I look forward to working closely with our friends in Washington, and maybe even some who aren't yet, but who should be. But we certainly aren't going to wait for them to alleviate our immediate needs. We will step up with our own capital. Mayor de Blasio will have so much more to say about the plan, but I do want to take 1 second before I stop this what was supposed to be a short keynote, and just remind people about a few basic truths about housing. Housing is the fundamental building block of our city, of any city, but particularly our city. No one can work, play, grow, learn, educate, drink great wine, have a great time when there's no decent housing to go back to at night, and it must be within people's budget. It is in the best interest of every single New Yorker, no matter where you live or how much you earn, to have a city that really is leading the way in building and preserving more housing. It really is about embracing urbanism and density. You know, for so long, density has been a bad word amongst urban planners. But now we're realizing that density, when done right, is our great, great advantage. It's what drives what a good friend of mine often calls the infrastructure of opportunity. Cities need to look beyond transportation systems and utilities when we think about infrastructure. Infrastructure includes education, employment, recreation, cultural, and health assets. denser cities are better positioned to invest in and leverage these assets. They're part of our natural advantage. It's an idea that makes sense, and one that we are putting into practice as we move towards aligning our housing policy and our housing investments with our capital program so that we can support smart, place-based strategies. We will build more, and we will preserve more. We will harness the engine that is housing development to create more and better jobs. And we will help more hardworking New Yorkers stay in their homes and without breaking the bank to do it. We're going to make sure that New York City is the place where people from around the country and the world want to be. So if our history proves anything, it's that fortune favors the bold, and boldness is something that New Yorkers have never lacked. And I look forward to working with every single one of you in this room to make that true statement come to a reality. Thank you so much, and thank you for waiting.